Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another NIOH webinar, online webinar dealing with a critical topic today, and that is ergonomics regulations. This particular webinar is done in a partnership with SAFSEC for the constructions industry. Before I get into any further details, and mentioning to you the details of the programs as well as our online virtual house rules, if I can put it that way. I need to just introduce to you the Executive Director of the National Institute for Occupational Health. That is Dr. Spo Khalamono. I just need to check with her if she's ready with her audio and her slides. In the meantime, just quick brief announcements. The program includes quite a number of speakers. Unfortunately, if we have a large number of people, we cannot allow you to open your microphones or to raise your hands unless there's a specific section for that. In the meantime, I'm just going to ask Dr. Spo Khalamono just to maximize her slides. At the moment, it's in the presenter display feature. Okay, so also what is critical for our engagement, yourself as attendees, is to type any questions you have in the question and answer box. If there's an opportunity to address your questions later, that will be afforded to you. And then, but definitely on the question answer box, they will receive attention. If you've got general administrative or other sort of admin related to general questions, that is for the chat box. The chat box is the single bubble, and the question and answer box is the double speech bubble at the bottom of your screen. Dr. Spo, in the previous mode, you just had it in the right full screen setting. It's back in the presenter setting.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's perfect. So again, everybody, by way of introduction, I have the pleasure of introducing the Executive Director of the National Institute for Occupational Health, a specialized division of the National Health Laboratory Services, Dr. Spo Khalamono. I hand over to you, Dr. Spo.
Okay, thank you so much, Ashraf and the team. I'm just opening my video quickly, just for those that don't know me to see me. I am going to have to close it just to save on the bandwidth for other people. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. And I think I just need to have a special word of welcome to all the speakers that have taken time in drafting their presentations and making sure that they are here to present. So thank you so much to Mr. Webster Mfebe, SAFSEC CEO, Mr. Warren Malone from the Department of Labor, Mr. Mduduzi Mtetwa from FEMA, Dr. Businya Ntumbu, our NIOH speaker, Dr. Isaac Oliver, and all the panelists. You are welcome, and thank you so much for agreeing to participate in this webinar. And of course, the most important people, we wouldn't have this webinar if we didn't have the participants that are here to listen to this, to all the presentations. So thank you so much to everyone for coming. I decided that I will just take you through to what the National Institute for Occupational Health is. I'll try and do it within 5 to 10 minutes. For some reason, I can't. Okay, this is our beautiful NIOH building. So I do get questions. We do get questions from time to time as to how do we relate to NHLS or how do we relate to the National Department of Health. So the National Department of Health, the NHLS reports to the National Department of Health, and the NHLS is our mother body. And under the NHLS, you have several divisions. We are one of them. The other one is NICD. We also have a huge laboratory service that has a national footprint. and we have our head office, our corporate, in Modderfontein, where NICD is, but all the other divisions are. So in a nutshell, that's where we fit in. We are indirectly an entity of the National Department of Health, but certainly a division of the National Health Laboratory Service. We are a multidisciplinary company, and our main aim is to develop and support occupational health and safety in the whole country. We do extend our services to the neighboring countries as well. And what are these functions? Our functions, besides supporting the development of policy, we do a lot of professional capacity development in terms of teaching and training at a whole lot of universities around, but also in technicons, and in-house we have a few courses, occupational health courses that we run. And I'm happy to announce that we do have two courses that have been recently accredited by QCTO for us to run. So we do quite a lot of teaching and training, and this webinar being part and parcel of our training efforts. We also contribute to legislation and regulation amendments via the different governmental departments, for instance, the Department of Labor or the Department of Minerals and Energy. We also provide a service and surveillance. A lot of you would know about the occupational health surveillance system that was started in October last year. But if you want to hear more about it, please do visit our website. And we offer some other strategic services, including the specialized laboratory services. So the lab services that we offer are not routine services like the ones that NHLS, the broader NHLS offers. Ours is specialized, and these are geared specifically for occupational health. Our partners, we have a broad band of partnerships from governmental entities to trade unions and NGOs and business, to universities and other academic institutions, and also professional societies. At the moment, it's mainly SASON, and SAYO, and we also have local and international partnerships with ILO and WHO. Speaking about WHO, the NIOH is currently the WHO's collaborating center for occupational health. This is a prestigious status in that you work with WHO and you collaborate efforts of the WHO within the African region. And I think if I'm correct, we are the only one in the Sub-Saharan, anyway, Sub-Hub, sorry. My tongue is twisted there. So we are the only, so the scope that we really cover is quite large. And we have been recently nominated as the Center of Excellence by the Mine Health and Safety Council. And we also work very closely with the International Labour Organization, and several of our NIOH members sit on quite high level committees within the ILO in Geneva. I did mention that we have labs, specialized labs, and our labs are SANAS accredited. I'll skip this slide because it essentially talks about what I have spoken about already. So the services in particular, we have pathology services, autopsy service, but there's more on our website in terms of each and every department offers as services. So I'll just highlight a few. Occupational medicine, most of you would know, we run a referral clinic. Occupational hygiene, we do hygiene assessments. Micro and immunology, there's also a dermatology clinic there, but there are other services, your bioaerosol services as well. Toxicology, we also, I think a lot of you would know a lot about nanotechnology. That was one of the main services within toxicology, and they also do risk assessments. Epidemiology and surveillance is mainly research, and they currently hosting the OHSS, the surveillance system, and doing a lot of surveillance, analytical chemistry with analysis of especially chemicals, organics and inorganic. And then we also have HIV and TB and health systems. Information services assist with query handling, and we also have a resource center and a library, but we also have an e-learning platform. The SHE is usually services the NHLS, and we have a biobank. Our biobank is one of the 3 biobanks in Africa, and it's the only one in Africa that actually meets certain standards. I don't think I'll go into this, Ashraf, but I think one important issue that I needed to highlight is, knowledge generation and innovation. Research is a focal point, and what we do is we conduct research, and we formulate our research agenda based on the priorities within the Republic of South Africa. So we steer away from blue sky research, where we just collect data just for the sake of publishing and not necessarily impacting on everyday life of a worker. Teaching and training, I did allude to it. There's quite a lot of training courses, formal and informal, that we partake in, some of whom we host here, but others is in collaboration with academic institutions. So if you need more information on our services, please do visit our website. Our website also has information on all COVID material, all the guidelines from the Department of Health, from the Department of Labor are on our website. And our website, I think Ashraf will mention, if he hasn't done so, it is 0 rated. So please feel free to attend. Even our previous webinars, the records of our previous webinars are on our website. So please feel free to go to our website. So thank you so much, and everyone is welcome. And please enjoy the webinar. I know that is going to be very valuable, especially talking about ergonomics, a topical issue in this day and era. So thank you so much, everyone. Ashraf, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much. That was Dr. Spoor Ganamono, an occupational medicine specialist and our executive director here at the National Institute for Occupational Health. Thank you very much, Dr. Spoor, for that introduction and giving our attendees an idea of the services and profile of the NIOH. I'm very proud to be associated with this institute. And now back to our program and the list of speakers. We will first have the open remarks by the SAFSEC CEO, Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Webster Mfebe. That particular remarks were pre-recorded, as he's unfortunately not able to join us in the session today. That is followed by the representative from the Department of Employment and Labor, Mr. Warren Mallon, who will deal with the Occupational Health and Safety Act 1993 and the Ergonomics Regulations 2019. That's followed by a representative of FEMA, Mr. Nduduzi Mtetwa, who will deal with reporting and managing of ergonomics incidents within the construction sector in particular. And that's dealing with clearly the issue of sort of a compensation and rehabilitation probably approach and a perspective there. My assumption, we will hear from Nduduzi. We will have a short ergonomic break for about 5 minutes, and after the ergonomic break, we'll be joined by my colleague from the Occupational Medicine section, Dr. Busisiwe Nyatumbo, and she will deal as an ergonomics focused person with the topic ergonomics in the construction sector and engineering perspective. And then that is followed by Dr. Isaac Olivier, and Dr. Olivier is going to deal with the occupational health program aligned to the new ergonomics regulations, roles and responsibilities. Now, just to note, maybe a correction to what I've said earlier, that the last panel discussion, that is the Q&A session, has been open for microphone facility. we will manage that very carefully based on the person who's been identified to contribute live on the microphone from the attendee side. The microphone will be activated and deactivated once that person is done, because we are unable to open up the microphones for everybody. But given the time allocation for that particular session, we do not have an unlimited number of people that we can manage for the open microphone facility at the end. So at this point, on behalf of the NIH, in partnership with SAFSEC, it's important for me just to say thank you very much to, in particular, two persons, and that's Kobus van Wijngaard as well as Dr. Loazi, and now I forgot his surname, apologies, I'll get to it in a moment, who played a key role with our colleagues in the occupational medicine section to plan and prepare this particular program for today. At this point, I'm going to ask my colleagues in the IT section, that is Glenn and Tabani, just to play the video recording of Mr. Websam Febe. The two people I must thank is Kobus van Wijngaard, as well as I think it's Dr. Loazi Maki, if I got that right. My apologies. This morning my names are not working so well. Okay, great. So if you could proceed, thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Webster Mfebe, and I'm the CEO of the South African Forum of Civil Engineering Contractors, SAFSEC. I would like to welcome you all this afternoon to this collaborative NIOH and SAFSEC webinar regarding one of the burning topics within the construction industry, the South African 2019 Ergonomics Regulations Implications for the construction industry. SAFSEC, being a representative of a large number of construction companies within the South African construction sector, similar to the National Institute for Occupational Health, values the provision of relevant information and training to all its valuable stakeholders. Therefore, offering information and training that will allow organizations and individuals to make informed decisions regarding aspects that are relevant to the industry as a whole. One of the SAFSEC department objectives is to keep stakeholders and the industry at large informed and up to date, as witnessed during the COVID-19 pandemic, where various procedures and tools were developed in addition to the SAFSEC COVID-19 reporting monitoring tool, constructionsector.online. Other programs also include the SAFSEC Risk Reduction Program that assists organizations with their SHEC management and performance. Once again, SAFSEC, in collaboration with the NIOH, brings to the industry a valuable training webinar, and I, as the CEO of SAFSEC, would like to thank everyone involved in the development of this webinar, with special thanks to everyone from the NIOH, including Dr. Spo Khalamono, Nompumelelo Ndaba, Ashraf Raycliffe, Busisiwe Nyantumbu Mkize, and Edward Sipirwa. From SAFSEC, I would like to thank Dr. Lwando Mikey from the SHEC Committee and Kobus van Wijngaard, the SAFSEC National Advisor. I furthermore would like to thank our presenters and the organizations they represent, who are all long-standing SAFSEC partners. Mr. Warren Mellon from the Department of Employment and Labor, Dr. Busisiwe Nyantumbu, NIOH, Dr. Isaac Olifir representing OSHCARE, and Mr. Mduduzi Mtetwa representing FIM. Thank you. Enjoy your seminar.
Thank you very much. That was the pre-recorded welcome by the SAFSEC CEO. and in fact, welcoming and thanking also all our speakers for joining us here today. So if I could just ask my colleague Glenn and Barney if they could just promote Dr. Maki, Dr. Luando Maki, to a panelist as well. I'll appreciate that. Thank you very much. Okay, so our first official speaker on the program is Mr. Warren Mellon, who's going to, on behalf of the Department of Employment and Labor, who's going to deal with the Occupational Health and Safety Act 1993 and the Ergonomics Regulations. And in preparation for that, a reminder to everybody, please just to observe the questions in the question and answer box, as well as to ensure that your general comments is in the chat box. We will have a limited open microphone session towards the end of this particular webinar. So today, again, we are dealing with the South African 2019 Ergonomics Regulations Implications for the construction industry. So I'm going to ask Warren if he could share his slides. And by way of introduction, Warren Mellon has worked at the Department of Employment and Labor from 2007 and spent 11 years as an inspector. He's currently employed as a specialist in the Directorate Occupational Health and Hygiene at the Department of Employment and Labor. His current task includes reviewing regulations relating to physical stresses, noise-induced hearing loss, environmental regulations for workplace, and the ergonomics regulations, and facilitating the approval of occupational hygiene approved inspection authorities, the AIAs. Warren was one of the members of the technical committee who drafted and promulgated the ergonomics regulations. Warren completed 4 qualifications, the latest in 2019, being a Master's of Public Health in Occupational Hygiene at the University of Pretoria. His dissertation was on occupational diseases in the construction sector. So he's well suited for our audience and for this particular webinar. He's also registered with the South African Institute for Occupational Hygiene, SIO, and as an occupational hygiene technologist, and is a member of the South African Ergonomics Society. With that introduction, Warren, thank you. I see that your slides are in presenter mode. If you could just maximize them for presentation purposes. With that introduction, a quick reminder to everybody, this particular webinar have been accredited for CPD points, and the link as well as the password for the test will be circulated after the event. General certificates of attendance will be circulated as per standard practice, and the other one requires the online test for you to complete. If you could maximize, Warren, your slides, thanks, and then I will hand over to you once we've done an audio check on your microphone.
Ashraf, it's showing as PowerPoint from my side.
Yes, it does. As this, we see the smaller slides on the left-hand side and the main slide on the right of the panel. Is it that little icon at the bottom that looks like a little screen? Right at the bottom, next to the slider for size, that one here.
It's still showing like that.
Okay, I don't know if you prefer to share for us to share. I'm sure there's a simple setting just to fix this. Is it slideshow at the top and start slideshow maybe? The slideshow tab next to animations and then clicking start the slideshow once you click that. No, not that one.
Hi, yes, you are fine. Then you go to display settings at the top there.
There.
Yeah, and then swap presenter slideshow. Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Tabani.
Thanks for
I
that.
hand over to you, Warren.
Okay, thank you very much, Ashraf. Yeah, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you to NIOH and SAFSEC for giving us this opportunity to present at your workshop. So yeah, I'm just going to go through a brief presentation on the ergonomics regulations. They have been out for 18, 19 months, so I think most of you are very familiar with what the requirements are, but we'll go ahead. So just a bit of background. There's a lot of evidence out there and research being done that economic costs related to poor occupational health and safety practices affect both the employer and the employee. The employer through medical and rehabilitation costs, and the employee through loss of income. So as we also know in South African situation, one employee does support quite a few immediate and extended family members. So that can have quite a big influence on our social aspect of the country. So as the department, we have never accepted the position that injury and diseases go with the job. Okay, so the regulation, it was promulgated under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, but how can I say, the requirement of assessing ergonomics has always been in place since the OSH Act came into play in 1993 under Section 8.2D that requires the employer to establish hazards and precautionary measures attached to any work. So ergonomics assessments were required to be conducted even back then. Okay, so there's just a copy of the notice for the ergonomics regulations, which was published on the 6th of December, 2019. And then, that's just what I'm going to be covering during the presentation. So looking at, it's a few selected definitions, the scope of the application, information, instruction, and training, the duties for people who are exposed, the duties of designers, manufacturers, importers, and sellers, looking at ergonomic risk assessments, risk control, medical surveillance, maintenance of those control measures, records, the technical committee, and then offences and penalties. Okay, so the first definition I'm going to start with is the adverse health effect. So this is obviously related from exposure to ergonomics risks. So this means causation, promotion, facilitation, or exacerbation of a structural or functional abnormality, with the implication that the abnormality produced has the potential of lowering the quality of life, contributing to a disabled illness or leading to premature death. We did get a few questions related to the definitions we used in the regulation. So all of the definitions we used, they came from international accepted definitions. So just to put that as the background. So here's the next definition, is that of a competent person. So this has been queried a lot, but it comes down to, it means a person who has, in respect to that work or task to be performed, is a required knowledge, training, and experience in ergonomics, and where applicable, qualifications specific to ergonomics. And then also provided that where the qualification training is registered, it must be with the provisions of the National Qualifications Framework Act. Okay, and then also the person must be familiar with the Act and the applicable regulations. That is OSH Act. Okay, then ergonomics. Okay, this definition is taken from the International Ergonomics Association. So it means a scientific discipline concerned with the fundamental understanding of interactions among humans and other elements of the system, and the profession that applies theory, principles, data, and methods to design in order to optimize human well-being and overall system performance. Okay, then the work system also means a system in which the human participates, or machines, or human participates and machines perform work using information technology and other resources to produce products or services for internal or external customers. So pretty much everything in the workplace is work systems. So that was an important definition to include. Okay, then a ergonomic risk is a characteristic or action in the workplace conditions or combination thereof that may impair overall system performance and human well-being. And then the ergonomic risk assessment is the program, process of or investigation of identifying, analyze, evaluate, and prioritize any risk from exposure to ergonomic risks associated with the workplace. Then, okay, the last definition I'm going to concentrate on is the designer. Designers have a very important role. I'll get onto that later when we get to the designers section. So it means anyone prepares a design, checks or approves a design, arranges for a person at work under his or her supervision to prepare a design, including an employee of that person, where he or she is the employer. Designs temporary work, including components, so that could be very applicable in the construction sector, and also contributes to or has overall responsibility for machinery, plant or work system design. Okay, then the scope of application. Obviously, this regulation is promulgated under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. So wherever the Occupational Health and Safety Act is applicable, this regulation will also be applicable. So yeah, it applies to any employer or self-employed person who carries out work at a workplace which may expose a person to ergonomic risks in that workplace. And then it also applies to the designer, the manufacturer, the importer, the seller, supplier, sorry, of machinery, plant or work systems for use at the workplace. Okay, then information, instruction, and training. Okay, this is important as the employer needs to provide this training and information and instructions to the employee and other persons at the workplace so that there is compliance with the requirements of the legislation. So that program needs to incorporate at least these points that are mentioned here. There can be additional points that are put in, but that would be on the advice of that particular employer. So the training needs to cover at least the content and scope of the regulations, the potential sources of exposure to the ergonomic risks, the nature of the ergonomic risks, the potential risk of health associated with ergonomic risks, the control measures that are in place to prevent exposure, procedures of reporting ergonomic risk to either the health and safety representative or the employer, the precautions to be taken by the employee to protect himself or herself against ergonomic risks, and also the assessment of exposure, the necessity for medical surveillance, and the long-term benefits of undergoing such surveillance. Okay, then just to continue, the employer must conduct the training prior to the placement of the relevant employee in the workplace. And there must also be refresher training, but this is done on the recommendation of either the Health and Safety Committee or the Health and Safety representative, depending on if there is no committee at the workplace. Okay, then in all our legislation is not only the onus on the employer to comply with legislation, but also those who are exposed also have to do their part. So yeah, any person who may be exposed or is exposed to ergonomic risks must obey any lawful instruction given to him or her by the employer, or if there's a self-employed person, or by anyone who's authorized to do so on their behalf. So this is in line with Section 14 of the OSH Act. Okay. The use of measures adopted to control ergonomic risks. They need to cooperate with the employer in determining an employee's exposure to ergonomic risks. So that will be cooperation, be it medical surveillance, risk assessments, if there's any monitoring that needs to be done, like vibration monitoring or so. Reporting of potential ergonomic risks to the health and safety representative or to the employer. Reporting for medical surveillance. and also undergoing the information, instruction, and training that was received as well. Okay, so duties of designers, manufacturers, importers, and suppliers. Okay, so the reason why they are so important is because when I get to the hierarchy of controls later, these individuals, they can potentially remove hazards from the workplace before they even get to the workplace. So that would ideally be the benefit. So that's why they play such an important role in preventing exposure of employees to these ergonomic risks. So yeah, any designer, manufacturer, importer, supplier of machinery, plant, or the work systems for the use of work must, as far as reasonably practical, ensure that the machinery, plant, or work system optimize human well-being and overall system performance. Also that the supplying of machinery, plant, or work systems, they can be transported, received, stored, and handled in a manner that also optimizes human well-being and overall system performance, and also provides information, instruction, and training as needed necessary to allow potential users to achieve optimal human well-being and overall system performance during the use of machinery, plant, or work system. So they can't just give you the item that you've purchased from them and expect the employer and the employees to then know what to do with the equipment. They need to provide some explanation of what to do. Okay, so then D, they should also, as far as reasonably practicable, install machinery, plant, or work systems to achieve optimal human well-being and overall system performance. And finally, provide information to potential users on appropriate maintenance of the machinery, plant, or work systems. Yeah, because you can't just provide the item, you need to also maintain it to ensure that it doesn't create hazards going forward. Okay, so going on to the risk assessment now. So the employer must, before the commencement of any work that may expose employees to ergonomic risks, have an ergonomic risk assessment be assessment be performed by a competent person. And this needs to be done after consultation with the Health and Safety Committee and or Health and Safety representatives. So the risk assessment must be conducted at intervals not exceeding 2 years. And it must include a complete hazard identification, the identification of all persons who may be affected by the ergonomic risks, how employees may be affected, the analysis and evaluation of those ergonomic risks, and then prioritize those ergonomic risks. Yeah, so once you have your risk assessment completed, you need to review the risk assessment. So if that 2-year period, it's either the 2-year period or if the risk assessment is no longer valid, if the control measures are no longer effective, if there's been technological or scientific advances that allow for more effective control methods. Also then, if there has been a change in the work methods at the particular task or the type of work carried out, the type of equipment used to control the exposure, or if there have been any incidents or medical surveillance reveals that there's an adverse health effect where ergonomic risks are the contributing factor. Okay, so then what is linked with risk assessments is competency to perform the risk assessment. So the definition can be broken down into 2 aspects. The first one is the knowledge, training, and experience in ergonomics. The second part is the qualification specific to experience in ergonomics. So yeah, how the employer should ensure that the risk assessment is carried out by an individual who is familiar with the task being assessed, and also that individual must have the adequate level of competency to conduct the risk assessment. So yeah, just a little kind of diagram to show that you would start off with your baseline risk assessment, very broad, but as you go down to more issue-based risk.
Sorry, Warren. Sorry for
And the
interrupting.
Yeah.
Your audio disappeared on 2 occasions. Just monitor that. You sound perfectly now. So yeah, proceed
Okay.
again. We'll just monitor. Thanks. Keep on.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Asha. Okay, so as the hazards become more complex to be assessed, then that's when a higher level of competency would be required to assess that risk. But also when the risk assessment is done, it should also be done in a team aspect, but still one person in that team needs to be appointed as the competent person. Okay, so once you've done your risk assessment, there's obviously some control measures that need to be put in place. So this is where the risk control regulation comes in. So the employer or self-employed person must ensure that the exposure to a person is either prevented, or where this is not reasonably practicable, it must be adequately controlled. And then in order to comply with that first part, the employer must, as far as reasonably practicable, remove or reduce exposure to ergonomic risk by implementing control measures in accordance with the hierarchy of control. So it's either you prevent it completely, or you then put in control measures. So yeah, so just a slide on the hierarchy of control. So you start with your elimination, you can go to substitution, engineering, administrative, and PPE. So obviously your elimination is the most effective and your PPE is the least effective, and also then elimination has completely removed the hazard from the workplace, while PPE, the hazard is still present in the workplace. That's why, and you're relying more on the individuals. So I just have a little diagram of a before and after of how implementing the hierarchy of controls can work, and how one engineering control has managed to eliminate a number of hazards. So this I got from the United States OSHA website. So you can see beforehand there was a bucket on the floor and the individual had to bend over and pick up parts at the bottom of the bucket and then move them to a workstation on the side or either side. So after they put in a mechanism to tilt that holder or bucket, it then reduced the awkward postures that the individual was exposed to, also reduced repetitive movement, and then also the amount of lifting that had to be done, and it also eliminated the poor design on the left-hand side and came up with a better design. Okay, then following the risk assessment, then also one of the control measures is that medical surveillance needs to be conducted as well. So the medical surveillance needs to be overseen by an occupational medicine practitioner. And it must be implemented if the ergonomics risk assessment indicates that a particular employee must be placed under medical surveillance, or if it's recommended by an occupational health practitioner that a particular employee or group of employees needs to be put under medical surveillance. But the employer can also call upon an occupational medicine practitioner to ratify that recommendation from the occupational health practitioner. Then just continue about some of the details of the risk assessments. So in the case of new employees, the initial health examination should be conducted before the employee commences work. So that will be the ideal opportunity. But if that is not possible, it must be done within at least 30 days of the employee starting that particular task. And then it also must be a periodic health examination, which is also informed by the risk assessment. At the intervals for this periodic health examination is either 2 years maximum, or it can be shorter if the occupational medicine practitioner requires that according to the individual and their exposure. And then there also needs to be an exit health examination, also informed by the risk assessment. Okay, so ideally, unfortunately, a lot of employers, they are doing the silo approach when it comes to risk assessment, exposure monitoring, and medical surveillance. Yeah, but ideally, it's supposed to be a continuous flow of information between the three, and the information is continuously feeding back into the risk assessment that you get from your exposure monitoring as well as your medical surveillance to continuously relook at your risk assessment, review it, implement additional control measures, yeah, to prevent any adverse health effects. Okay, then maintenance of controls. So as I said previously, you can't just implement a control measure. It needs to be looked after and maintained so that it doesn't cause any adverse health effects or any ergonomic risks later in its lifespan to employees. So yeah, so that it provides for the benefit of employees, and the controls must comply with the regulations. It must be enforced and appropriately implemented, and they must be maintained in good working order. Okay, then we move on to the records that must be kept by the employer. Okay, so the records to be kept is your training records, your risk assessment, your risk controls, your medical surveillance, and your maintenance of controls. So for your training, it must be for as long as the time period that the employee is employed for, and anyone is able to see that document. Would it be a representative, a health and safety committee member, or an inspector from the department? The risk assessment needs to be kept for at least 40 years, and the same individuals are able to view those documents. The same with the risk control, it's the same individuals, but that you only need to keep for 3 years. Your medical surveillance, that is for a period of 40 years minimum. And this is with all medical records. It's only a medical practitioner can view the records, but however, if an individual like an inspector from the department requires to investigate a occupational disease or incident at the workplace, they can request permission from that particular individual, and they must get written consent to view the records. And then maintenance controls, that is also 3 years, the same as the risk controls. Okay, then the regulation prescribed the establishment of an ergonomics health and safety technical committee. So this committee, they will discuss matters affecting ergonomics and sectors and industries in South Africa. So the regulation also says who must be constituted in that committee. So it's a chairperson, 2 Department of Employment Labour officials, 3 people representing employers organizations, 3 representing employee organizations, 1 person from a professional body recognized by the chief inspector, 1 from a higher education institute, 1 representing occupational medicine, and then the committee can also co-opt a member if there is a specific sector that they need to draft a document for, and they don't have anyone on that committee who is able to do so. And then there are also duties that are advised. Okay. Sorry, I just need to clear my throat then. Yeah, so the regulation also prescribes what the technical committee can do, and they would in the end make recommendations to the chief inspector as well as the Minister's Advisory Council on Occupational Health and Safety. Okay, then we're almost done. So my time is okay. Okay, so just offences and penalties. Obviously, there are some consequences if regulations aren't complied with. So in terms of the regulations, sorry, just hold on a second, please. Sorry, it's a bit dry. Yeah. Okay, so it's an offence if the instruction, information, training is not complied with, even the duties of those exposed, the duties of the designers, manufacturers, importers, and suppliers, the ergonomics risk assessment, risk control, medical surveillance, and records, and the fine can be up to 12 months imprisonment or 200 Rand. Yeah. Move over. Sorry. So just in conclusion, okay, so the ergonomics is for better collaboration amongst all the cognitive disciplines. So it's employer has a part to play, the health and safety committee has a part to play, organized labor has a part to play, and other disciplines. And the ultimate goal is to improve employee health and well-being as well as productivity. Yeah, because I think everyone's heard it before that good ergonomics is also good economics, and that's probably very important in South Africa at the moment, particularly. So thank you very much. Yeah, so as Ashraf said, I'll be available for questions during the questioning phase.
Thank you very much. That was Warren Mullen from the Department of Employment and Labour, dealing with the Occupational Health and Safety Act as the broader context and the Ergonomics Regulations 2019. Thank you for that very thorough introduction to that, Warren. And I'm sure that the attendees would like to engage you. There have been some questions, not much, on the question answer box. I'll encourage you to have a look there as well. Okay, so our next presenter is Mr. Nduduzi Mtetwa. I'm going to ask Nduduzi just to share his, oh, there we go, found it, to share his PowerPoint slides and as well as to check on his audio. I need to make just a correction to my earlier announcement. I mean, there are two people that I thanked earlier on behalf of SAFSEC after the CEO's introduction, and that was Kobus van Wijngaard. The other person is Dr. And I'm not sure if I see him in the list anymore, but that was Dr. Luando Mazi. Let me just get that correct. Luando Maki, apologies. I'm struggling with some of my names today. So that's Dr. Luando Maki. In the meantime, by way of introduction, Nduduzi Mtetwa is the claims manager, the Durban claims manager in KwaZulu-Natal at the Federated Employers Mutual Assurance Company. That's the long name. FEM is the short name, FEM, as it is commonly known, for 7 years. Mr. Mtetwa joined as a registered nurse with the occupational nurse training and experience, and have acquired the COIDA skills through the University of South Africa, UNISA, and management through the University of KwaZulu-Natal and the GIBS. And with that short introduction, I'm going to hand over to Nduduzi. If you could just maximize your slides, Nduduzi, I can see the first slide and some of the smaller slides on the side. Or I guess start the slideshow. There we go. And just to check on the audio of your microphone, welcome again, and thank you for contributing to this webinar. Your audio sounds perfect. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Asha. I'll switch off my video. Yeah, I hope the network won't affect me. But yeah, thank you so much for the introduction, and I think and thanks, Mr. Malone, with I think with the technical skills that he was presented. But in my case, then I think, as you've heard, I come from FEM. We are the compensation fund that caters for building and construction. So that's why then I'll be dealing more about how then we look at it as COIDA in construction. Okay. Sorry. So in starting, we've got the definition of economics and the same definition that was shared earlier on. And this definition, we took it out from Economics Regulation and also from Occupational Health and Safety. So it's just a discipline or a scientific discipline concerned with the fundamental understanding of interaction among humans and other elements of a system, and the profession that applies theory, principle, data, and methods to design or order to optimize human well-being. And I think it's important also just to note that it talks about well-being. And then the common causes of economics, and that is also from Professor Smallwood and Haupt. That was in 2009. So these are related, and I think we can all associate with these are related to work, with lifting of heavy loads, performing repetitive tasks, frequent bending, which was shared earlier on, and how it does affect the body, working above shoulder height, working below knee level, manual handling of heavy or irregular size, adopting awkward work postures, working in confined spaces, holding the same position for longer periods, forceful exertion, working under hot or cold temperature. On economic sides, what usually affects is the vibration that affects tendons, muscles, joints, and nerves, contributed by a prolonged grip, which affects the blood supply, the tools with even without vibration, poor power tool maintenance, prolonged use of grinder. The construction environment, as per the BWI, estimated at 180 million construction workers worldwide, with 75% in developing countries, and argues that construction gives much needed employment for many of the world poorest and most vulnerable people. And that's, I think, what attributes even to what is happening in our country, that it has been also indicated that construction, creates more employment, and that's why there was, I think, a worry when there was an issue of COVID. But I think it's a topic for another day. But in South Africa, we cover almost more than 5,000 companies that have a policy with us. And then that's how then we take care of those employees. I'll discuss about the repetitive strain injury and the musculoskeletal disorders. And I think, as you've heard when I was talking about what are the common causes, so this is what goes on and it have an effect on the economics. A repetitive strain injury is an injury to part of the musculoskeletal or nervous system which is caused by repetitive use, a vibration, compression, or long periods in a fixed position. Other common names include repetitive stress disorders, cumulative trauma disorders, and overuse syndrome. While muscular skeletal disorder, which is common, are injuries and disorders that affect the human body movement or muscular system. The muscular system includes muscles, tendons, ligament, nerves, disc, which is the vertebra, maybe others know it, blood vessels, and other human body. And common skeletal disorders includes carpal tunnel syndrome, tendonitis, and tendon strains. I've shared the incident that we know that we reported at FEM, and just to indicate how it cost, and I think it will give that perspective on how then we receive such injuries. Muscle injuries, this includes sprain and strain, ligament, muscle, or tendons. So if any of these are strained, these are mostly injuries that are also reported. And the percentage, as you can see, it reflects as 2020 up to 2017. So that's just an estimation that I've used, the record. And probably to indicate the days lost of work. So these are days that are lost based on these injuries indicated in each year. And you can see there's a slight decrease and then I think it has started to improve. And this is not an accurate number when you talk about 2020 because of the COVID interference, and it might not be a true reflection. But if then it had the full year that we were construction was working, probably these numbers could have been worse. and then who were awarded with permanent disablement, which was less than 31%, because that's what we apply if it's a lump sum. So this is on lump sum. So it was only one that was awarded, 2 for 2019, 6 in 2018, and then 1 in 2017. So this number seems to be stable. It's very difficult to indicate whether there will be any permanent disablement, but these are things that we encounter when we have such cases, because we deal with it with different cases. So it depends with the treatment, the recovery, and that's what will tell us whether we are liable. But we've got a less number of those that are getting a monthly pension. And this was only applicable in 2017. I'm unfortunately, I don't have background of this, because I would have loved to share it so that it will give guidance to everybody so that we know what we're talking about. And this is an average cost. It looks okay, but if you go into details and looking on each cost on claims, you will understand how costly it is. But I have some on the slide, one of the details I'm going through. And this is an abdominal. This is not accurate because, as I said, it includes lumbar. Mostly when people have, as I was talking, vertebral or the disc, it affects the back. It's a back pain. So the back pain is mostly because of the ergonomics and the position. And when we have these issues, so it's difficult sometimes now to distinguish it, because on our description, it's abdomen including lumbar, but these are what we were reporting about it. And then muscle strain, any work involving the handling of an exposure to repetitive movements. And this has been minimal because I think people have got training, and I think Mr. Malone was just talking about that, the training, the details of assessment, which has it played a role in this. And then the joint injury, including dislocation, sprain, injury to cartilage. I think this is one of those that we have concern, because we might think it's a minor, but then it gets worse. Unfortunately, I only have records for 2 years, which is 2019 and 2020. But these stats are just giving an overview on how it looks when it comes to these injuries and the costs involved. Okay, what are the advantages of ergonomics? So when I'm saying advantages of ergonomics, so when we apply it, I think as the first speaker was talking about the importance of ensuring that we comply, and that's what we talk about, in compliance with our health and safety and other relevant bodies. So one is increased savings, that will have lesser injuries, more productive and sustainable employees, fair workers' compensation, like we shared earlier on, fewer employees experiencing pain. Implementing economics improvement can reduce the risk factors and discomfort, increase productivity, increase morale, reduce absenteeism. And if I'm talking about morale, and I think we will all probably agree that morale has been one of the things that has an effect on the mental health. So these are things that will assist in ensuring that you've got the happy employees who will be able to be productive. Primary risk. The following are factors to develop on musculoskeletal disorders. These are force, heavy lifting, push and pull, carrying and gripping, awkward position or posture, repetitive activities, overhead work, vibration. This is the same thing that I spoke about earlier on. But when is the work likely to result in an injury? And that's what I think we need to look at if we were to work. And I think it covers the part of training that was mentioned. When is performed frequently, when it is performed for a longer period, when the work is intense, when there's a combination of several risks. So I think the expert will guide when he talks about risk, what do we mean. The impact of poor ergonomics. Ergonomics is getting more airtime. It takes a while to see the symptoms of poor ergonomics. You'll find people that will tell you that we've been doing this like that, but are we doing it right? And then people then tend to teach and pass it on to others. And then possible increase in office worker claims, and that's also is slightly to increase because of people that are working in an office, working in a desk, and not having a proper ergonomics. Temporary loss of critical skills, which could be a concern. Costly to rectify after diagnosis or office equipment. Higher claims with no rebate or possible loadings. I'll leave it at that because we do cater for rebate and loadings based on the claims. So that's what we mean, that if ever then there's high cost claims, it will have an impact on the policy holder or on the policy. The process of reporting to FEM, and I think that's what we need to understand, because this is the gist of our responsibility. So as soon as you are aware as an employer or a policy holder, so you need to, once an employee informed you, to apply Section 38 and report. And this means then it has to be completed with Section 39, completing of the ER, employer's report. Probably others know it as WCL2. And then just complete all the questions that are there. There are questions that are important, but we feel that it's important then to complete everything in case there are questions that needs to be answered. And then complete a sprain and strain. And that also help a lot, especially on weightlifting, so that we can be able to understand really what's happening, so that we can make a determination whether we accept liability, is it related to work or not. Then providers then will register the claim. Registration does not mean we accept liability. That's why I'm talking about registration and adjudication. And then we can be able to determine whether we accept this as a claim or not. So yeah, we'll update with the claim number that has been done, completed. And then claim will be allocated for administration. And when we administer claims, we are responsible for the medical treatment and taking them to hospital, the doctor for treatment, arranging further appointment with the specialists who will see them, physio, because mostly these require the physio and occupational therapists to assist them to recover and be able to get back to the workforce. And then we'll compensate whatever is applicable. It's either there's a loss of earnings or there's a loss of there's a permanent disablement. And the loss of earnings then is applicable as per Section 47, and that's we call TTD. Okay, so I did share some of these case studies that I think we have had, but you know, when you're looking for some information that will share so that it can be able to make sense, I was unable to get the details of these cases so that I can be able to share, but some they do have information I think that will be relevant to everybody. So this was a back injury which was strained and sprained with a pre-existing condition. So this, I think this individual was working, lifting heavy object, and then claim was accepted for liability. We had to pay a loss of earning, as I mentioned earlier, for 3 months, which was a long time. And treatment included hospitalization, treatment in ICU, general ward, X-ray, CT scan, and MRI. Sometimes they will require a normal X-ray, which might not indicate the concern when the person is still complaining of pain. And then the physio and OT, and the non-invasive treatment, rhizotomy. This rhizotomy is a treatment, sometimes it goes on forever and without, because the employees might get addicted, or the patient might get, addicted to that. It sometimes it does not get completed. So that's why we inquire and we give guidance that we will accept for how long. So these are things that might have an impact on the claims cost, as we were mentioning earlier on. And the compensation booked off for 12 weeks, and then no impairment was awarded because there was nothing that was abnormal. But this took longer than was anticipated. On case number 2, it was a sprained ankle. We paid TTD for 181 days. This is the amount that was paid. As you can see, it's a huge amount. Hospitalization was 85,000, and the total cost of the claim was 287. There was no permanent disablement. And then strained back for the case 3. This guy was working with the gate, and then when working with the gate, then he experienced the pain, and he took off 2 weeks, and we thought it was a minor. It developed to a serious issue because now he had another injury, which then said it worsened the condition that he had. So the second injury, total cost was 1.9. So that's why I did not, and I'm just including that because it started with this sprain and strain, but he said he fell, but it was worsened by the condition of the back strain. And we had paid 1.9 million on that claim, including the permanent disablement of 20% and 18 months loss of earnings. That employee was not working for 18 months. Identifying work ergonomics hazard at the workplace. As I indicated, that expert might have, I think, different version with this, and they can be able to share some light. But the hazard is any interaction with the made weld that causes the user discomfort or strain. There are 3 primary types of ergonomics or hazard. There's objects, environment, and the system. And I think it agrees in what was shared earlier on. And result with poor posture or unnatural or uncomfortable movements. Ergonomic hazard includes workstations, desk, all tools, equipment, machinery, workers used to do their jobs, and the physical processing workers perform. Possible prevention. In the work environment, we can design a specific workstation for every employee. We can give workers the tools and education, include ergonomics as a topic to cover in toolbox talks, hire an ergonomics expert to give a presentation to staff and work with employees one-on-one, provide workers with the resources they need to change elements. And I think when we talk about just sharing what was mentioned earlier on by Mr. Malot, when you talk about the competencies, and that's what is expected for us to have prevention. Tools and machines, make sure all tools and machines are economically designed. Go through your entire tool and machine inventory and see where you can improve. I think that's all on my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. That was Mduduzi Mtetwa, who was dealing as the claims manager with the question of reporting and managing of ergonomics incidents within the construction sector. I see, Mduduzi, that there's a question in the question and answer box that we would like you just to also have a look at. And you've saved us a few minutes, so we'll be going to the ergonomic break a little bit early, and that is an ergonomic break for about 5 minutes. And I'm going to just quickly place this particular slide there. So we will be returning at about 10:02, right? And we will pause now for you to be able just to have that comfort break and return at 10:02. So thank you very much. We're back shortly. Okay, welcome back to this particular webinar where the National Institute for Occupational Health and the is in partnership with SAFSEC. And again, I would like to just thank two particular colleagues from SAFSEC, and that is Dr. Luando Maki, who is the SAFSEC National Shirk Committee Health Representative, as well as his colleague Kobus van Wijngaard, that is the SAFSEC National Shirk Advisor, for playing a key role together with colleagues in our occupational medicine section, that is Dr. Nompumelelo Ndaba and Dr. Edward, I'm going to just get that correct, Sipirwa, Dr. Edward Sipirwa, for organizing this. The webinar was opened by our Executive Director, Dr. Spoha Lamono, followed by the opening remarks by the SAFSEC CEO, Webster Mfebe, and our first speaker was Mr. Warren Mellon, that had dealt with the Occupational Health and Safety Act as well as the Ergonomics Regulation, giving a thorough introduction to the 2019 regulations. And then before the break, we had Mr. Duduzi Mthethwa of FEM, and he dealt with reporting and managing of ergonomic incidents in the construction sector. I now have the pleasure of requesting a colleague in the occupational medicine section, that is Dr. Busisiwe Nyantumbo, to prepare to share her slides and to check on her audio. Dr. Nyantumbo specializes in ergonomics, and she is the senior medical scientist in the occupational medicine section here at the NIH, the National Institute for Occupational Health. And as I've mentioned, the NIH is a specialized division of the National Health Laboratory Services. Dr. Nyantumbo Mkhize, if I can just give the full surname, runs and manages the ergonomics unit, which provides ergonomic services to South African workplaces, including the standardized testing of workers suspected of having hand-arm vibration syndrome, HAVS, a condition caused by regular exposure to vibration produced by vibrating hand tools. She performs ergonomic risk assessments of jobs and workstations of workers referred to the occupational medicine clinic suspected of work-related musculoskeletal disorders, MSDs. She is also involved in ergonomics teaching and training of occupational health practitioners and workers. And today again, Dr. Busisiwe is contributing to this particular webinar. I'm going to ask her just to prepare her slides. In the meantime, a reminder for all of you who have questions on the topic and the presentations, the speaker's presentation slides, you can use the question and answer box to type your question, and the open questions there will be addressed by the presenters, as well as people who are from the occupational medicine section that are panelists helping to answer questions there. And just to acknowledge those colleagues, we have Dr. Nompumelelo Ndaba, who's the acting head of the occupational medicine section, Dr. Hlonipile Maso, Dr. Edward Sipirwa, who are assisting in answering the questions there as part of the occupational medicine section team on this particular webinar. And then if you've got general comments, general questions, we are going to encourage that you use the chat box. Only the questions for the presenters, please, if you could do that in the question and answer box. And as a very quick reminder, our one session, that is the session just towards the end, is going to allow for open microphones, and those who will be recognized, their microphones will be activated. And we're going to encourage our presenters to engage with you during that session as well, apart from the question and answers that you are typing at the moment. So having introduced Dr. Busisiwe Nyantumbo Mkhize, I am now going to hand over to her. I see that the slides are ready for presentation, and just to check on her audio and microphone quality. Okay, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready, Ashraf.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Your audio is also excellent. Yeah, if you could just take carry on.
Is my presentation visible?
Yes, your presentation is maximized, and we can all see slide number 1, entitled Ergonomics in the Construction Sector, Engineering Perspective. I'm going to hand over to you with just a reminder to stay close to your microphone. Thank you very much. Please proceed.
Thanks, Ashraf. Good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome to the NIOH and SAFSEC webinar. My presentation is going to talk on engineering perspective on ergonomics in the construction industry. The presentation is going to cover briefly health and safety in the South African construction industry and health and safety outcomes related to ergonomics in South Africa as background information. Next, I'll cover ergonomics, then process of designing for health and safety, and then I'll show you examples of health and safety in design through photographs, benefits of health and safety in design, and conclusions. Globally, the construction industry has a positive role to play in the socio-economic development of a country through creating employment and economic growth. In South Africa, statistics of Q1 2020 showed that a total of 1,344,000 workers were employed in the formal construction industry in different provinces of South Africa. The construction industry contributed 4% towards the gross domestic product of the country. The South African construction industry is experiencing poor health and safety performance, which is demonstrated by the occurrence of adverse health events. In fact, this has been actually shown by the previous speaker. This could be partly due to challenges in implementing the Construction Health and Safety Accord, as the vision of having zero harm in the industry has not yet been achieved. The Construction Health and Safety Accord is a pact between the government, business, and labor, which agrees that, or which says that there'll be a reduction in the number of problems in the construction industry. The problems could be also due to not being able to effectively incorporate ergonomics principles in the design stages of projects. From the literature, most commonly reported adverse health effects related to ergonomics in the workplace are musculoskeletal disorders. Studies conducted on MSDs in the construction industry are very few. And no studies on hand-arm vibration syndrome could be found. The prevalence of MSDs in construction workers is shown in Table 1. A study by Deacon and others investigated the health of 142 construction workers and found a 15% prevalence of MSDs. A study by Himalawa investigated 212 construction workers to determine the effect of work-related low back pain and functional activities and found that 25% of the workers had low back pain, and low back pain was associated with functional limitation. A study conducted in Nigeria found a 39% prevalence of musculoskeletal disorders in construction workers. That study, I'm using it just for comparison. The only study conducted in South Africa on hand-arm vibration syndrome found a prevalence of 15%. This study was conducted on gold miners. The comparison study conducted in Malaysia, which has a similar climate as South Africa, found a prevalence of 18% in construction workers. These studies indicate occurrence of MSDs in South African construction workers. Of course, they are not representative of the South African construction industry. When comparing these studies with studies conducted elsewhere, the preferences vary due to the methods used in the studies. However, ergonomic risks and functional limitation were identified in the South African studies as associated with MSDs. One of the recommendations put forward by the South African studies is that application of ergonomics in the construction industry, or the recommendation is that ergonomics should be applied in the construction industry. From the Federated Employees Mutual Assurance Company statistics in 2018, 8,384 accidents occurred, with 65 of them being fatalities and 996 being disabilities. A study conducted by NIOH using FEMA data from 2004 to 2006 showed 195 fatalities over this period. The top 3 causes of death were motor vehicle accidents, struck by, and fall on different levels. The study suggested that enforcement of regulations may reduce fatalities on MVAs. Just to unpack the definition of ergonomics, as a discipline, ergonomics as a scientific discipline, having interactions in the system and using design to optimize the overall system performance. Ergonomics applies to all industries, including construction. As a scientific discipline, ergonomics draws its knowledge from other sciences and integrates it for application in the workplace. Ergonomics aims to create equilibrium, that is, a state of balance in the interactions that happen in the system. Ergonomics fundamentally is design or engineering driven for the health and safety and productivity at the workplace. During the execution of tasks in the workplace, interactions occur in the system. The diagram shows interactions between the elements of the system. In this case, as the center of focus, the worker, and the other elements of the system. Those elements are equipment, job task, including the worker. These elements should be designed in such a way that interactions promote health and safety, which means that ergonomic principles should be considered at the design stage. Ergonomics is therefore about putting balance or equilibrium in the system. This is demonstrated in this diagram, which represents a system that is in balance. This balance is between the physical and psychosocial work demands with worker capacity. In this diagram, a system that is not in balance is shown, where work demands exceed the worker capacity. This scenario goes against the principles of ergonomics. Ergonomics can be applied at 3 levels of prevention. At the primary level, it can be applied at the early stages of a project cycle. At this level, this hazard is eliminated, so this level is proactive in nature. The secondary and tertiary levels are reactive in nature. Both apply during the construction stages and later. If we go to Regulation 5 of the Ergonomics Regulation, which talks about the duties of designers, one of the duties of designers is that a designer must, as far as reasonably practicable, ensure that the design optimizes human well-being and overall system performance. Design for health and safety aims to create designs that will reduce the risk to the health and safety of clients, builders, users, those who service or maintain the structure, and any other person could be affected by the design. In fact, one of the presenters said that designers are actually very important in ergonomics because they actually remove the hazard before their products or their designs reach the workplace. So designers are at a better position to influence the health and safety of structures they design before they are built and used in the workplace. This can be done by incorporating health and safety concepts throughout the life cycle of a project. And the life cycle of the project has all these phases, from conception to demolition. The figure here shows the different stages where the design, the health and safety in design can be incorporated. So the designers, they have to foresee and eliminate risks at early stages of the design project. Designing for health and safety follows a process with 6 steps. From collecting information from the client through engaging with the client, asking questions relating to the project, next, research and brainstorm with team members, which require a lot of consultation, coordination, and cooperation. The information collected is synthesized to understand the health and safety risks throughout the life cycle of the project. So by researching, they have to understand the health and safety risks. Next, they have to test the design ideas for health and safety and adapt the design to reduce risk. The next step, they have to document and provide information on mitigating measures which have been introduced, as well as any residual risks. The first step is very important. The engagement with the client, because the information that is collected from the client, because the client knows what they want. So the designer has to try and get all this information with the view of identifying or of getting information that will assist in identifying the health and safety issues that could be present in the design, and also to make sure that those issues are designed out. So when the designer asks questions from the client, the answer may be that, or may indicate that there'll be activities performed that will produce a lot of noise. As I have mentioned, this information will enable identifying possible health risks from activities that will be undertaken. The next question may be, how will designing for those activities affect the way the structure is collected? Now that the designer knows that one of the activities may produce noise, then he can think about the control, which may be incorporating soundproof material in the design. And then the line of questioning continues about hazards that may be involved in the activities. And also if the hazards that are present, that if they are site specific or not. So say, for instance, there's mention of the use of vibrating tools. So then the designer needs to think about, oh, vibrating tools, they're a health risk. They cause hand-arm vibration syndrome. Can I use tools that do not emit vibration, like tools that can be operated remotely, or tools that produce less vibration? If there are, what are the better alternatives? And the inquiry continues with the identification of hazards and their control measures. The design process involves team members who meet regularly to work on the design. So they have to research and brainstorm. And the information obtained from the previous steps are also used and researched to come up with solution. And this has to happen as the design development progresses. Further, research is done on materials and features used in other structures for similar purposes and used in similar situations. So they need to find out health and safety. They need to find out how health and safety has been planned on those structures, and also about any health and safety risks or issues with those structures. And also find ways the potential health and safety issues that can be designed out or managed in the design. Find out ways the potential health and safety issues can be designed out or managed in the design. The information in the previous step does not follow in the different phases of the life cycle of the design project. So in this step, the designer needs to understand health risks through the life cycle of the design. So the designer needs to consider the following groups of people who may be affected by each aspect of the structure. The persons who will be constructing the structure, the persons who will be working in the structure, the persons who will be demolishing the structure. And they need to consider how each group may be affected by each aspect of the structure, and what aspects of the structure may pose health and safety risks, under what circumstances, and how. To answer these questions, a risk assessment and management is performed. The risk assessment is done in 5 steps, starting with identifying the hazard, assessing and evaluating the risk, control, reassess, and review. Say, for instance, a hazard of working at heights has been identified from the information that has been provided by the client. The probability of falling, that is, the risk, would have to be determined using the risk assessment matrix. Say it is decided that the severity of falling would be catastrophic, and the likelihood of falling is likely to happen. This means that the risk of falling is critical. The next step is to control the hazard using the hierarchy of controls. Falling may be designed out or eliminated, or designed to minimize the hazard. We'll see some of the design controls that have been incorporated into the design in the slides that follow. The reassessment and review should continue throughout and should address new hazards as they arise through changes of the design, reassess and review the impact of proposed controls on the identification of hazards, adjust and add controls to further eliminate or minimize residual risk, record any risk which would need to be managed. The next step of testing the design is also important because in this step, the designer has to ensure that the design is without health and safety risk. Thus, calculations, analysis, tests, and examinations have to be carried out. The next step is to provide information. And this information will be about how the design has incorporated considerations about health and safety and remaining risks to be managed. The information should comprise of a health and safety file, a health and safety design report, and a risk register. The health and safety file can have information like the results of the testing that has been done, and meetings and workshop and safety data sheets. The health and safety design report will have the information of the risk assessment. The health and safety design report will have information from each designer in the project who contributed information in the design. And the risk register will have information about the risk assessment and management. And the last step, once the design has been accepted and implemented, the whole process of its development can be reviewed to identify lessons for future design. Now, looking at design options, health and safety design options that can be used at the design stage using photographs. say the client talks about using hand tools at a floor level. So the designer will have to think, oh, I have to come up with a solution there and apply the risk assessment and management that I've gone through. And also come up with controls using the hierarchy of controls. Then he can come up with a better design tool that will allow the worker to work in an upright position. So this can be specified in the design. In the next photograph, a situation where a worker is working in a kneeling position. So the designer has to come up with a solution on how they can avoid the workers from working in a kneeling position. And then he can specify working using this kneeling creeper, which will actually protect the knees while the worker is working. In this photograph, we are looking at manual handling and working above shoulder height, which puts the strain on the body parts involved. A control measure of mechanical devices can be specified in the design to alleviate strain on the workers. To prevent manual handling, the power vacuum lifter is introduced in the design. In the next photograph, a person lift is introduced to eliminate above shoulder height. Another example where there is a risk of falling, so the designer can specify guardrails as shown in photograph A to prevent falls from the floor or from floor openings. In the next photograph, photograph B, the designer can specify fixed ladders like this one, instead of workers using ladders that are not fixed, and that would prevent workers from falling. So this can be specified in the design. The last photographs, for instance, this one, the designer can actually specify you have a machine here that is placed on the roof. So they can specify that the machine is not placed closer to the edge of the roof to prevent workers from falling. So they can specify the number of centimeters that the equipment should be placed away from the edge of the roof. Another photo where the workers have to go up to the roof. They can specify a hedge in the design to prevent workers from falling. So it's been demonstrated in the previous slides that ergonomics is incorporated in health and safety in design, or can be incorporated in health and design to eliminate or control ergonomics. However, ergonomics has other risks, not necessarily physical risks. So it's got physical risks and psychosocial risks. So far, the presentation has been covering physical risks. And these physical risks, they emanate from not considering ergonomics at the design stage of the project, while psychosocial risks emanate from poor work organization at the workplace. So there is no way that designers can incorporate psychosocial risk. But we have to remember that we still have psychosocial risk. So at the level of the workplace, the psychosocial risks can be mitigated. So I'm just saying that I don't want to create an impression that at this designing stage, you know, although we are focusing on economic physical risk, but we still have psychosocial risk that need to be taken care of at the workplace. Therefore, it is important to note that the health and safety process in design only considers physical risk and not psychosocial risk. I've already covered that. In this process, psychosocial risk can be taken as residual risks, and policies at the workplace are suitable to deal with them. The following are some of the benefits of health and safety in design. Elimination of potential hazards at the beginning of the project. This is often cheaper and easier than minimizing their effects later in the life cycle. Reduction in accidents and adverse health effects, particularly during the construction and maintenance stages of a project. Most importantly, the preservation of the health and safety of workers. Then reductions in damage to property and environment with associated reductions in related costs. Another benefit is more efficient and effective risk management at the design stage. So when the design reaches the workplace, most of the hazards have been removed. The last benefit that I have is reductions in operational maintenance and litigation costs when things go wrong. To conclude, more research on musculoskeletal disorders is needed to determine the magnitude of the problem. Statistics on injuries are not readily available. These statistics can assist in establishing trends. Musculoskeletal disorders and accidents can be prevented through the incorporation of ergonomics principles during the project design. Ergonomics knowledge is needed in the process of designing for health and safety. And designers can benefit from attending relevant occupational health platforms to get a sense of the impact of their designs when they are used. Finally, the introduction of ergonomics regulations in South Africa is expected to assist in protecting construction workers against ergonomic risks. This is the end of my presentation. Thanks.
Thank you very much. That was Dr. Pisisiwe Nyantumbu Mkhize with her contribution dealing with the ergonomics in construction industry and engineering perspective. Without much ado, I'm going to ask Dr. Isaac Olivier to just prepare his slides on the topic occupational health program aligned to the new ergonomics regulations, focusing on the roles and responsibilities. And by means of an introduction, Dr. Isaac Olivier is a qualified medical practitioner with postgraduate qualifications in occupational health, travel medicine, and medical incapacity management. He has international experience in both occupational and community health, with specific focus on the mining and oil and gas industry. He has participated in the conduct of several large-scale health impact assessments in multiple African countries and has assisted clients with the development, implementation, and monitoring of management plans for both community and workforce health. This includes the development of IEC and BCC programs as part of both health and safety and environment and corporate social responsibility compliance requirements. He also acts as a specialist consultant for the extractive partners during international finance audits. As an extension of his occupational health expertise, he plays an active role in medical incapacity management for a variety of companies. And with that introduction, I welcome Dr. Isaac Olivier. If you could just test I see your slide is maximized. If you could test your audio, and I will hand over to you immediately, sir.
Thanks, Ashraf, and I hope everybody can see my slide, and I hope everybody can hear me quite clearly. I'm mindful of the fact that this is the graveyard shift on a Friday afternoon of an extremely long and busy week, so I'll try and keep it short and sweet, guys. So today we're going to speak briefly about the roles and responsibilities when you implement your ergonomics programs in the workplace. Just to give you a brief overview of what we will be chatting about. So we'll talk about the approach to planning, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation when you implement something like an ergonomics program, and a little bit about those roles and responsibilities when you do that, who does what and when that has to happen. And I'll try and give you practical examples as we move through this. I've been involved in the development and the implementation of a few programs in South Africa with regards to ergonomics. Although I cannot claim to be an ergonomics specialist, it's more to do about the program and how the program is set up and how that's implemented and monitoring. And then obviously I think after my presentation we'll have a short time for questions and answers as well. Right, so the first question should be is how do we approach it? How do you, when you look at the ergonomics regulations that were promulgated in December 2019, how do you approach this whole conundrum? So the best solution is to approach this as you would any other new health and safety program. Make sure your approach is iterative, inclusive, consultative, and reproducible. So iterative, it basically just means you have to be able to go back and forth. It's not something that you develop once and then you're stuck with it. You have to be able to amend this and change this and make sure you can adapt as you move along. Inclusive, obviously, it's not something that two people can do in a room. It's something that has to include anybody and everybody in your organization to make sure it's fit for purpose for your organization. It's one of those things, it's similar to Cinderella. It's not a fit for all, it doesn't fit, the shoe doesn't fit anybody. It's not fit for purpose, it's not a cookie cutter approach. You have to make sure that what you develop fits your specific organization and your specific requirements. Consultative, you have to reach out outside of your organization if you don't have the skills inside to address those specific technical aspects. And then obviously reproducible. It's something that you will have to reproduce across various sites or across various timelines in your organization. And it jumped ahead quite a bit this side, unfortunately, but obviously the PDCA cycle, the plan to check act cycle, the standard ISO 9001 approach is usually the preferred methodology for something like this. And I think everybody must be tired of seeing a little PDCA cycle, but by now, but this continues to be one of the best ways to approach these types of issues. The benefits of the PDCA cycle is just quickly going to run through this, is it promotes that continuous improvement of processes. It's, like I said, not something you develop and then run with it and it doesn't change in the next 5 to 10 years. It's that continuous improvement of incremental way of doing things better time and again. You can implement this in a smaller scale, first of all, and then ramp up across certain industries and across certain sites if you do want to. And it then allows for continuous improvement by employees in all or any department, if you so wish. And obviously it prevents wastage of time, and it allows for brainstorming across multiple disciplines within your workplace. So to start off with the planning phase of this whole endeavor, it's almost like assembling the Avengers. You have to assemble your planning or your work group who will be tasked with doing this, and you need to make sure you've got the appropriate people in the room. And obviously these days it means 3 people around the table with masks on and the rest on Zoom, to make sure that we comply with all the COVID regulations. But seriously, we found it easier to get your working group from your health and safety committee. It's people who are adept at working in a health and safety environment with a health and safety frame of mind already in place, and it provides you with the correct internal stakeholders that you want around the table. You obviously have to have your management around the table, because they will be the guys that set the budget, that will allow you to go as deep as you need to go, and that the budgetary constraints will allow you to go. Not everybody is a large company with unlimited amount of resources, so you need to make sure that what you do is fit for purpose. Obviously, health and safety guys need to be there. We found it very important to have your supervisors or your line managers or your heads of department in the group as well. They will actually know what's going on the ground, and they will actually be able to give you better detail of some of the activities and some of the high risk activities that you see in the workplace itself. And then obviously you do want your employee representation there as well, whether that's just from a employee perspective or from a union perspective as well. External stakeholders that you can consider including, and I would advise very strongly that they are in the room as well. They've got a very important role to play, is either an ergonomist or a hygienist that's trained or that's well adept at working with ergonomics, and then obviously your medical services provider, the guys that will be doing your medical surveillance, is important as well. We have seen instances where people develop plans and say, well, we want test X, Y, and Z, but then the medical surveillance providers are not able to actually do those tests, or they don't have the technical capacity or the capabilities to do those tests, or they might have alternatives that might be better suited for your needs. So whether that's the medical services or medical surveillance provider you've got in the room, or their representative OMP, that obviously helps a lot in the planning phases. Next step would obviously be to draft your ergonomics program and then have your exco or your management sign off on that. So that's sort of the first step of getting towards your ergonomics program. So the responsibilities of that planning or working group that we discussed in the previous slide. Obviously, the first step would be to review existing legislation, industry standards, and then your industry best practice. And you'll see we've got 2 little figures on the right-hand side. The existing legislation obviously is the ergonomics regulations that were published, but then industry standards, there are many international guidance documents on ergonomics, and specifically ergonomics in the construction industry. You'll see what I've got on there is a document that's from the CDC in the US, actually quite a nice document that talks about simple solutions for ergonomics, and specifically in the construction industry. SAFSEC itself has done a whole lot of work specifically with regards to ergonomics in the construction industry in South Africa, and how that will look and what the risks associated with the construction industry are, and what sort of an expectation we can get from a medical surveillance perspective. So even on a national level, on a local level, there's been a lot of work that's been done to see what the risks are, and what should that risk assessment look like, and then that outflow into your medical surveillance program, what needs to be there as well. So even locally, there's a lot of information available that you can have a look at. You don't need to go and reinvent the wheel on your own. So then obviously, if you've done that, if you've reviewed what's out there, you develop your ergonomic risk assessment. And you obviously look at your risk control measures, and that includes all of the equipment selection, your operating procedures, your PPE, your procurement, basically according to the hierarchy of control. And then from that, you develop your ergonomic program. And looking at including your SOPs or referencing out the SOPs that you'll be developing as a result of that. What will manual handling look like? What specific high-risk activities have you identified in your industry or in your company? What do the inputs into your medical surveillance program looks like? What will you expect your medical surveillance provider to do and feed back to you? Obviously, there has to be some training materials or plan inserted into that program as well, because it's the expectation of the regulations that you do provide training to all of your employees as well. And then obviously the implementation plan of this whole program. So then if we move on to implementation, first step would be training. You need to make sure that your employees, your workforce is trained on this, and there's a whole long list of what they need to be trained on. But the important thing is that they need to be training, but there also need to be competency assurance as well. You can train people, you can give them a lecture, you can give them everything, but you need to make sure that those people understand what they have been trained in, and whether that's a small test, whether that's a sort of a competency assurance in that manner, it's a good idea just to make sure that people understand it. And in this training, it's obviously also important to make sure it's culturally acceptable and linguistically acceptable, that you provide it in a language that your workforce can actually understand. What we've seen to be helpful is if we train supervisors as high-level basic assessors. It also helps them to determine whether people understand what's going on, and they then also in the workplace, as a sort of a continuous observation, can see whether people have internalized those teaching points and whether they are actively implementing them or not. Frequency of training will have to be addressed, and obviously initially you'll do this more than once. You'll do it a bit more frequent than later on, and it's always good to never underestimate the value of IEC, or Information, Education and Communication, or BCC, Behavior Change Communication, during green area meetings or your safety meetings in the morning. You give people little snippets over a longer period of time, rather than trying to stuff everything into people's heads in a day or two. So that's something to consider as well. So workplace SOP, the standard operating procedures, you need to make sure that in those SOPs, you've got all of your high-risk activities identified and addressed. So usually those relate to manual lifting in most of the industries that I'm involved in. But you have to make sure that everything is addressed in there. And you need to make sure that there's adherence to those SOPs. And that links back to the supervisors that have been trained, so that they can observe the workers while they are working, checking whether people are understanding what they need to be doing and whether they are doing that correctly. And that also enables us to have the supervisors identify other activities that you as the working or the planning group might have missed while you were sitting in an office somewhere and planning this. So it's important to make sure that we identify any other activities that we might have missed that also needs to be included. And that also includes the contracts and procurement or the supply chain management. We need to make sure that when people procure stuff, whether that's a spade or whether that's a new front end loader, that ergonomic considerations are taken into consideration as well. And you'll see that it can be as complex as a vehicle for a shorter and a taller driver, or it can be something as simple as a garden spade that you use to do gardening on a Sunday afternoon. But every single tool, every single piece of equipment does have ergonomic considerations. And even if the procurement guys are just trained that they should need or seek the input from the ergonomics guys in your institution before they start buying things, that's already a first step in the right direction. So when we look at implementation, and specifically looking at the medical surveillance program, it's important that the ergonomic evaluation is then also brought into your medical surveillance program. And as Dr. Busisiwe said, we've got reactive versus sort of a proactive perspective on this. It's sometimes difficult to do a good combination of both. And I'll go through examples of each of these as we move along. Some of them are easier to do, some of them are more difficult to do, some of them are more expensive to do, and some of them are cheaper to do. So you have to find the balance that suits your organization, that allows you to still get your information from a medical service provider, but within the budget that's realistic for your company, obviously. And there are multiple approaches. So a prospective evaluation would look like something like this. And we typically look at something like physical ability testing or PAT testing. And PAT testing basically is just evaluating the physical abilities of an employee before they actually do their job, to see whether employee A can do activity A before you actually appoint him in that position. And the same goes for existing employees that's been working for you for the past 5 to 10 years. And if they are subject to this test, to make sure that they can actually comply with the standards that you've got set there. And the objective of this testing is to identify those personal deviations in a person. So whether there's a bad back or a previous back injury, previous shoulder injury, previous issues with carpal tunnel, or whatever the case may be, so that we identify that prior to exposing them to that risk in your workplace and say, well, this, you might not be adequately suited for position A, you might fit better in position B, that type of a thing. Now, obviously, it's important that these tests are standardized. It's not something that's a thumbs up. You need to make sure that the test that you do is a standardized test, that it's been validated, that you can actually say this test has been approved by some other regulatory authority or academic institution, that this test is the most accurate test to test for condition A, B, C, or D. It needs to be applicable. You can do any number of tests, but if those tests are not applicable to the position or the work that this person needs to do, you can either find that you fail the person, a person who was able to do this job, but because your tests weren't applicable, you erroneously throw him out of the work site, or you might do the test and the test doesn't give you a good indication of whether the person can do the job or not. So that's why it's important when you consider prospective evaluation and you consider something like physical ability testing, that you get specialized assistance on this, that somebody like an ergonomist assists you in setting this up, and that they work with your medical services provider to make sure you do the correct tests for what you expect your employees to do. And that's a lot of the work that SAFSEC has been doing, is to see what tests do we need to do on construction workers so that we can, with some measure of accuracy, say, if you've passed this evaluation, you are as safe as we can determine to go into the construction industry. And then obviously reproducible. It's something that you need to be able to do if you've got a big construction project in Gauteng, but also if you've got a big construction project in Pofadder, where you've only got the one local GP that can do your medical surveillance over there. You need to make sure that you have to have this test as a standardized test that you can have any medical service provider render to your company. So if we look at evaluation or process evaluation while people are in the job, and that's as an example, evaluation, and that's basically looking at people in the workplace while they are doing the activity or their job, and looking at their personal abilities in doing this job and the risks associated with this. So there's a few cons in this one. It has to be performed by a qualified person, somebody who knows what they're doing and with specific training with regards to ergonomic risk evaluation and then quantification as well. So these are a few videos and a few shots of a company that I do consultancy for, where we've recently implemented functional job evaluations, and you'll see these are on our higher risk employees, the guys with a BMI of about 45, if I remember correctly, and ergonomically evaluating them in their workplace and also checking to see whether they would be able to do activities that we would expect of their specific job categories. Now, obviously, this is more expensive because you have to have a consultant, occupational therapist, or somebody else that's been trained in ergonomics and in functional job evaluations. But the benefit of this is that she's able, or the person is able to quantify specific job risks, specific activity risks, and then even specific person risks. Because you might get a different set of answers whether you look at a job, such as a fitter or a millwright, specific activities that job category has to perform, or then specific risks to a specific person. You'll find different risks or person-specific risks in 5 different persons. So it's important to know what any specific person can do in that category. But it allows you to address that risk on a personal level. But that's sort of a Rolls-Royce level type of a determination, where you can look at every individual person or any individual job or activity. But there are different ways of doing this. You can simplify this and look at something like REBA or RULA, which is Rapid Entire Body Assessment or Rapid Upper Limb Assessment. And there are many ways of how you can do sort of this in-process evaluation. Effect monitoring, that's sort of at the tail end of evaluation. So this is when you are observing or looking for, and sorry, it's passive ergonomic stresses on bodily systems. So in plain English, it looks to see whether you can find the effects of ergonomic risks in a person. Does that person already have hand-arm vibration syndrome? Do they have impingement syndrome in their shoulders? Do they already have mechanical backache in their lower backs because they've been exposed or overexposed to ergonomic risks? It's similar to biological effect monitoring. When you look at toxins, you are looking for the toxin in the body itself. That effect has already taken place. And this is the least effective way of looking for things because the damage has already taken place. But this is cheaper, this is easier to do, and it's easier to reproduce in smaller areas where you don't have really technical backup and capacity to do this. So there are multiple ways of doing this. You'll see on the screen there, we've got an example of a questionnaire, ergonomic discomfort questionnaire, and that's the Cornell medical discomfort questionnaire. There are numerous others, the Nordic musculoskeletal questionnaire, the HAVS questionnaire, stuff like that. Now, this allows the person that evaluates the employee to look at specific areas in the body, whether that's shoulder, lower back, knee, shoulder, wrist, or elbow, and they score their discomfort in that particular body part, and they give it a score. You can quantify that score, and you can do that again next year and the year after that. So you can sort of track an injury in a person. Say in year 1, it's X amount of discomfort. Year 2, it's more. Year 3, it's more. And in that way, you can determine whether there's progression of that condition in that specific employee. And you can also determine whether there are certain areas in your entity or in your corporation, whether that's a specific department that has more injuries in the shoulder, or more injuries in the knee, or more complaints about knee pain, or more complaints about lower back pain. So it allows you to target certain areas and certain body parts that might be overexposed. But like I said, this is less than ideal because you're already seeing the effect after it's taken place. So when we look specifically at medical services providers, what should your medical services provider be able to feed back to your medical surveillance program? Obviously, fitness to work status, and that's unfortunately to a certain degree what we've seen up until now. You get your 50 or 200 or 5,000 COFs, and you know who's fit to work and who's not fit to work, and those get filed and you get on with the job. Unfortunately, that doesn't allow you to manage the risks in your workplace all that much. What we should be looking for is some more nuanced information. So when we look at fitness to work, looking specifically at the proportion of who's fit to work and who's not fit to work, and specifically when we talk about ergonomics, we need to know whether, when we've done that evaluation, how many are fit for that specific job from an ergonomic perspective and who are not. And then that can give us information whether our tests are fit for purpose or not. Are we overestimating or are we underestimating? And are we using the correct criteria to exclude people from certain high-risk activities or high-risk areas? It can also help us to identify new or unknown high-risk activities. Like I said, if we have Department B and we see in Department B, we've got 40% of people complaining of lower back ache, which is much higher than in any other department. it should point us in the direction that something is wrong in Department B, that there's a risk that we haven't identified there, that we might not be aware of, and that we might need to go and investigate further, or we might need to implement new restrictions for that specific activity or that specific area. Or if we see there's increased deviations in existing employees, if we see more people are testing positive for lower backaches or for shoulder discomfort or for carpal tunnel syndrome, we need to make sure that our control measures are effective. But we also have to take into consideration, are there other issues that might be confounding this? People getting older, people that might have other injuries that are not related to your occupational injuries or non-occupational diseases. That might also affect some of these outcomes and these answers. So that also needs to be taken into consideration. But your medical services provider should be able to tell you after they've done your work that from an ergonomics perspective, we've found a specific amount of people fit and unfit with regards to ergonomic risks. We've seen certain higher amounts of ergonomic issues in specific departments, and in those higher issues, we've identified certain bodily systems, whether that's a shoulder, whether that's a lower back, or whether that's a knee, that allows you to then look at those and further investigate those. So once you've gotten that back, when you get to the check portion of your PDCA cycle, it's time to reassemble your planning committee. Obviously, you have to re-look at your risk assessment and your medical surveillance or your ergonomics program at a 2-yearly interval, or when you introduce new processes or activities, if there's any new findings from a scientific research or legal or legislation have changed, or you see increased ergonomic disorders in your workforce. If your medical services provider comes back to you and say, well, all of a sudden we've got an issue with lower back pain or with shoulders or with knees, then you need to relook at your system. And you need to critically re-evaluate your findings from your previous risk assessment, but also look at what your supervisors have fed back to you, your person job observations, whether that you've got any new information from that, whether your employees have given you any new information on higher risk activities or issues. And then obviously the feedback from your medical services provider. And you might need to do specific targeted fact finding. So if your medical services provider told you that department A has a problem, you might need to send somebody to that to observe the working conditions, to observe the working activities and see whether there are specific pertinent issues that you may need to address. And again, you may require multiple cycles of this to identify and address all non-conformances. You're not going to get everything right on the first go. You need to go through this again and again and again, and that's why you use that PDCA cycle to make sure that you address everything and you capture everything. Obviously, the last portion of the PDCA cycle, the amendments, or the action part of this, you need to act on the information that you've done or that you've received in the previous cycle, and then obviously adapt what you are doing following the hierarchy of control. And that leads us back to the P cycle again, planning to see how you're going to do things differently. Do you need to change? Do you need to do small adaptations? Do you need to do larger adaptations? And then go through the whole cycle again and again. Okay, so I see I am a bit over time, so I think this leads us to our planning session, or sorry, question and answer session. So, right, I'm just going to stop my video here. Right.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Olafir. Maybe I could start with you with the very first question. There's been quite a lively discussion in the chat box where I think the first person who initiated the discussion was asking the question, sort of, what is an SOP? And quite a number of other attendees then promptly responded in the chat box. So some indicated it could be deemed a standard operating procedure, and others indicated it could be a safe work procedure. So just to engage you on this, Dr. Olafir, what would your definitions and comparison between the two, are they the same?
Well, Ashraf, I think that'll depend on from corporation to corporation. So I think you can use either. The intent of a standard operating procedure or a safe work procedure, in my mind, is similar. You need to make it's the company standard on how to perform specific activities that, as far as possible, eliminates risk to your employees, basically. I see somebody has used the example of I use stack cement as an example. So, and I think that's the intent of that acronym we use there, is that you develop specific ways of how you address certain high-risk activities, whether that's manual lifting, to say that you will, when you do manual lifting, it will be done in the following way. You'll have 2 people when it's in excess of 20 kilograms. You will bend with your knees. You will stack things like this. You will use a lifting aid when it's in excess of another weight. So that everybody is aware of how certain high-risk activities need to be approached and how they need to be implemented.
Okay, thank you for that. And just quickly, sort of around with our presenters. Warren, you've heard all the presentations, you've seen the questions in the question and answer box. What is the immediate sort of burning question or point that you would like to share with the attendees? Quickly to you, Warren, before I move to Duduzi.
Yeah, thanks, Ashraf. I think, yeah, the starting point is knowing your company, knowing what hazards you have, and finding the correct assessment tool to use when doing your risk assessment, and getting that competent person sorted out, but getting that supporting professionals for that competent person as well. I think that's from our side, that's the good starting point and the focus point for the risk assessment. Yeah, for ergonomics as well, and for any other stressor, not only ergonomics. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Warren. We will be opening the microphone soon. Just Duduzi, any immediate comments? You've seen the questions. I saw you've also answered there in the question and answer box. Is there anything that struck you in the questions, or a major important point you want to just quickly share with the attendees?
I think I might share a few things that you know, have an impact whenever these are reported. And one of them, I think they were highlighted with the presenters. But for us, when it comes to us, one of the key issue is the delay in reporting the incident. It makes it difficult for us to say, is it related or not to the injury. And then the other part, I think, as I said, they talk about the medical surveillance that has been presented. Now, that's when then we'll can be able to pick out whether it is a pre-existing, how it contributes to the economics. So I think those are things that I can mention that it's worth mentioning. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Dr. Busisiwe Nyantumbo Mkhize. Busisiwe, any quick comment from your side before I go to Pumla Nteu, who's has a raised hand? Busisiwe.
Thanks, Ashraf. I think from my side, the most important part is that designers, you know, they have a big role to play in this, because, you know, if the design, you know, has not been designed in such a way that the risks have been eliminated, then it means that when that design now, you know, is put into, you know, construction, or it's manufactured, then it may create a problem to the people who use it. But also, the problems may not come from the designers. The problems may come to the users. They might use a wrong design for a certain thing. So that's important. But to me, the main thing is that the design process here, which is what ergonomics is all about, is the, you know, it's the most important one.
Thank you very much for that. Yes, I've just quickly typed to Pumla. Okay. So I was about to allow Pumla to speak or ask a question or make a comment, and Pumla could still perhaps consider doing that. Pumla has indicated that the hand was lowered. So I don't know, there's B. Paul, who's typed a comment on the designer's question. So I don't know, Paul, do you want to make your particular point? Or let me just start while Paul is thinking about that. B. Paul, I'm not sure if the B is the first name. JJ Barnard, I'm going to open your microphone. If you could just unmute your microphone and ask your question or make your comment, please proceed.
Yes, good day, man. I think in the Q&A we did ask it, and I think we are not quite clear. We're not quite answered, especially on the ergonomics and the normal construction regulation risk assessment, because I think we are not answered correctly, you know, especially when you get audited on site by a Department of Labor, and they talk about a competent person. They like to see a qualification on that. So I think the question keep coming up. Are they going to be regulated? Is there going to be somebody that's specifically going to work with this ergonomics and going to do the risk assessments? Are they going to train on that, the competent person? And I think that's a bit of a question that keeps, I know, I think Warren did answer it, but it's not clear to us still. We are still in the dark. I'm still in the dark at this moment.
Okay, so let me put your question to our panel. Your question was, must you incorporate your ergonomics assessment with your construction regulations risk assessment? And there was an affirmative answer to that, that your risk assessment should include all hazards, and that includes the noises, hazardous chemical agents, ergonomics, hazardous biological agents, etc. It therefore can be incorporated into the current risk assessments. So I'm not sure if there's from any of our panelists any particular comments that they want to make on the point raised by JJ Barnard. You can just unmute your microphone or raise your hand, whichever is the quickest for you. Also, whilst I wait for any comments from the panelist, there's the point raised by Isaac Wilele Fokwane, who asked, what is the minimum time frame for reporting the incident to FEM? Maybe I could put that to you, Mduduzi. What is the minimum time frame for reporting the incident to the FEM? Mduduzi, if you could unmute your microphone.
Okay. Yeah, first of all, the employee needs to report immediately as soon as they're aware there's an injury. And then the employer has to report within 7 days of being aware by completing the employer's report. It does happen that some cases may be delayed to be reported. So that's when we will inquire the reason for the delay or a reason for the delay consultation. But the prescribed time is 7 days.
Okay, thank you for that. That was a quick reply. I see that I have a hand. It's Siamekeji Berlin Kolanji. I'm going to just open your microphone. If you could unmute your microphone and ask your question or make your comment. Siamekeji, please proceed. I can't hear you. Your mic is unmuted, but I'm not sure if you're speaking. Okay, while we're checking there, if Chiamekezi still wants to make his comment, the microphone is open. There is a point made by B. Paul. Firstly, the designers are pertinent, well, part of the property developers team, or designers are part of the property developers team, not the construction company. And he further states the detailed designer risk assessment with regard to ergonomics must be included by law into the tender, or it won't be properly costed by the tendering companies. Thanks for that comment, Paul. JJ Barnard wants to make a comment again. Please unmute your microphone. Chairman KG, just check if your microphone is working, because when you had it unmuted, we couldn't hear you. JJ Barnard, please proceed.
Okay, just a question. Is it only because like our company is registered with RMA, so we still do our normal claims on the RMD reports? We don't have to go through FEM. Am I right if I say that?
Okay, let's put that question, JJ, to Mduduzi. Mduduzi, you've heard JJ Barnett. Please proceed.
Yes, yes. No, it's correct. So you submit as per the COIDA, section 39, within 7 days with either RMA, FEM, or the compensation fund. Those are the main compensation fund that I'm familiar with.
Okay, so thanks for that. Did I see a hand? I heard a voice. No. Okay. And I'm inviting our panelists, if there's anything specific they want to comment on what we've just covered, from some of the questions raised by the attendees. And I invite the attendees to raise. I see that also on the question and answer box, there were a number of comments also made by Niels Nokia, who's the CEO of NIOH, apologies. And I don't know if Niels want to perhaps, Warren, I see your microphone is open. Please proceed.
Yeah, thanks, Ashraf. Yeah, I just see there's a question about, it's in the chat box, about the use of vibration gloves while using drilling machine. So I think from that, the aspect with hand-on vibration.
Okay, we've lost your audio there for a moment. Could you just check on that, Warren?
Wrong touch. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
let's proceed.
There is, it's more the factor, you don't really get gloves that absorb vibration. You should rather try other control methods, such as buying equipment that vibrates less, or maintain the equipment, or even shortening the duration of exposure. Because yeah, you aren't really going to get gloves that reduce vibration. The gloves come into play when you are using handheld tools and you're exposed to cold as well. So the gloves will be more of a thermal protection against the cold, because cold with vibration on the hands can lead to some occupational diseases. So yeah, there isn't really, just to answer that question, there isn't really any gloves related to absorbing vibration from machinery.
Ashraf, you're muted. We can see you speaking, but we can't hear you speaking. Sorry.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much for rescuing me there. So yes, gloves would not be an effective barrier between the vibration and the body of the worker. So yeah, the route of transmission there would not be blocked. Thanks for rescuing me there. Okay, so I see two hands. I'm first going to ask Dr. Olivier to please unmute and then make a comment. And I see Busisiwe has also just indicated by unmuting that she wants to speak. Dr. Olivier, should I just quickly, ladies first, Dr. Busi, could you just proceed to unmute again?
Okay, thanks, Ashraf. I just wanted to add, to what Warren has said about the gloves. In fact, with the gloves, because the vibration has got, high frequency vibration and low frequency vibration, you find that the gloves, would absorb the high frequency vibration, but the low frequency vibration is not absorbed. So what happens, and those gloves are called anti-vibration gloves. So because of that, people would use them because they think that they're going to protect them. So at the end of the day, the people who are using them, they still get the vibration from the low frequency vibration. So if you use the gloves, you still develop hand-arm vibration syndrome, but it takes a longer period for you to get it because that high frequency vibration is removed, but the low frequency vibration remains. Also, Warren mentioned that the gloves, specifically abroad, they use it a lot because it is cold there. So it actually warms the hands because with hand-arm vibration syndrome, it's actually, it is induced by the cold. So the gloves will be used to protect from the cold. But here we don't have that problem. So just to summarize, so the gloves, they are not effective in protecting workers from vibration exposure. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that detailed and unpacked answer around vibration and the gloves. Over to you, Dr. Ulafir, and then I've got two hands amongst the attendees.
Thanks, Ashraf. Just wanted to ask one comment that I saw in the question and answer box to say, I think Kruger made the comment about trust OMPs are ready to perform the necessary ergonomic test. I think this is the important thing that I wanted to leave with everybody today is that this is something that's new to most of the OMPs as well. And we are also still learning and finding our feet in all of this. And that's why my important piece of advice would be to engage with your OMP that's going to do your medicals or the medical services provider that's going to do your medicals to make sure that you understand what they are going to be doing and that they understand what you want from them. Otherwise, you're going to send them, your workforce, to that medical services provider. They're going to do assessments on that, and they're going to say yes or no, the guy's fit or not fit. But if you don't get any value back from that, then it's a box tick exercise. So we need to make sure that we get the correct information from those guys doing your medical surveillance, so that they align the tests that they're going to do with what's the risks in your particular industry and your particular company. So have that chat with them beforehand and make sure that you know where you meet each other in the middle and what every party wants from this whole process.
You might be muted.
Thank you very much. Okay, second time. Hopefully there's not a third time. So over to you, Niels. And then I'm not sure if Bernd Wortmann wanted to make a comment as well. I saw your hand a moment ago. Niels, over to you.
Thanks, Ashraf, and thank you to all the panelists for great presentations. Unfortunately, I think we have to revert back to the competency issue. It was myself that posted the original comment about the competency person in the Q&A. And thanks for the reply, Warren. I saw, if I may quote you, that you indicated that it's up to the employer to decide who will be competent or not competent to do the ergonomics risk assessments. That might be so if the regulations are self-regulating, and parts of it is self-regulating. Unfortunately, the ergonomics regulations when it comes to the competency or competent persons for risk assessments is very specific, so much so that it actually included a definition for it. So I foresee problems with that, as indicated, and I don't want to repeat it again, that the Department of Labour themselves, agents, auditing companies will demand some form of qualification. And to escalate this even more is that we all saw now in the draft OHS amendment bill that a specific new duty is placed on the employers. So obviously the Act takes preference over any regulation, and included specific risk assessments. So the words are specific and the words are risk assessment, and they will be done by persons that have specific competencies for those risk assessments. So I think personally, if I may put this to the Department of Employment and Labour, there's an urgent need for guidance notes, not only on the whole ergonomics regulations, but also specifically on the competency of risk assessments, because I can foresee applications for work permits being stopped because there is no demonstration of competence of who the risk assessor is. I can see agents declining the health and safety plans from contractors, etc., etc. So that's just my comment. Thanks for the opportunity. I think you muted there, Ashraf.
That was the third time. Third strike. Okay, no more. Okay, so I've unmuted you, Bernd Wortmann. Please proceed.
Thank you very much, Ashraf. I'd just like to find out something. Firstly, a very interesting afternoon and hearing all the presenters. A lot of focus has been made on the word designer this afternoon. Typically in the construction industry, you obviously get the client, you get the consultant, and then you get the contractor. Can one infer by the word designer that obviously the client has to already be the first body that is totally aware of ergonomics, followed by the consultant, in our case, for example, that has to take up once more and be in tune with how to build an item ergonomically. I would just like to have a bit of a feedback or response on the responsibility of where the ergonomic responsibility lies, starting right from the get-go, client, consultant, contractor. Can somebody possibly comment to that? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. So is there any comments from our panelists that could just deal with that particular question by Bernd Wortmann? Okay, go ahead, Warren.
Yeah, so with regard to that comment, the regulation does put duties on the designer, the supplier, the manufacturer, and all those that were mentioned in my presentation. So yes, the designer, that would then mean that the designer and the people that he's going to, or he or she is going to be designing whatever the item is for, they need to have a consultation beforehand to figure out what is needed. And then, yes, they would then need to have some knowledge of how this design may affect the individual, and then rework that design to reduce that exposure as far as possible. So yes, the designers, or if it's an architect or whoever, they would need to have some kind of a knowledge with regards to ergonomics, or be informed by someone from the consultant side, or from the employer, or the agent, or whoever the case may be.
Thank you very much.
Ashraf, I think there's a fourth time.
Ashraf.
Thank you. Okay, so Tiamekeji, do you want to open your microphone and just make a comment or ask your question? Thanks, please proceed. There seemed to be an issue on your side. Your microphone is definitely unmuted, but we can't hear you. And you're not making the same mistake I've made 4 times now by not unmuting my microphone. Okay, so unfortunately, it seems like we're not going to be able to assist you there. We do have a question by, and we are in the last, say, 2 minutes or so of our, unless there are more questions that arise, then we can perhaps conclude. There was a question, and I think it's perhaps was answered now by Stein Malindi, and Dr. Olivier has just indicated to Stein Malindi an answer. Stein's question was, I would like to know as to where one can attend the ergonomics risk assessment training in order to be declared competent for being able to carry out assessment. And there was an answer given for a particular course by Dr. Olivier. So if you are interested, you can see that in the Q&A box. We don't have any further hands. We don't have any further open question answers. A hand just popped up and disappeared again. So I'm not sure if somebody was experimenting there and checking if I'm on the ball. My microphone is definitely open on this occasion. Okay, so there is one hand, and this is towards our panelist for concluding remarks. And I'll start with Dr. Olufir. I see your hand is raised. Please proceed.
Thanks, Ashraf. Sorry, I saw there's just one more question that Isaac Welile Fukwani wrote in the general comment box to say that how long should we keep medical records? And that's typically 40 years, Isaac. And the disadvantages of employees not doing their exit medicals. Basically, there's a legal liability for the company if you don't do an exit medical, because you're unable to prove that that employee has left your employee with no occupational diseases, occupational injuries. And that's why you have an exit medical, to make sure that that person, that you've looked after that person while they were employed by your company, and you've got that proof as part of the exit medical. If they leave without an exit medical, they can make a claim afterwards that they now have noise-induced hearing loss, or they've got an injury that was sustained in their employment with you, and you don't have proof that that was not the case. So if they absconded, we typically into that medical record, we put in all our efforts to contact them to let them come back for an exit medical evaluation. Otherwise, we just use their last medical evaluation as their exit. And it's legal under the Mine Health and Safety Act if it's within 6 months. If it's prior to that, we demonstrate how we try to contact that person. We put all of the communication in there to try and get this person out, and said that we couldn't get this person to come back for the exit. Therefore, we default back to his last medical examination as his exit medical then.
Thank you for that answer. And then finally, Tiamekeji has managed to get the question typed in the question answer box, as well as in the chat box. Thanks for coming back to us on that. And the question is, I just want to find out if a trained risk assessor cannot be appointed as an ergonomics risk assessor in an organization. So perhaps I could start off on that particular question with Warren, or maybe Dr. Olufir, who's been talking about training now for a moment. Warren, please proceed.
Okay, I'm going to give the general answer that it depends on what hazards are in the workplace and what competency that individual has. And those two, as we've been saying previously, need to merge with each other. So there's no point in the person being a specialist in physical ergonomics, but meanwhile they need to assess cognitive ergonomics in the workplace. Then even though that person might be an ergonomist, they don't have the background on the cognitive aspect to conduct a risk assessment. So unfortunately, there is no one answer fits all. It needs to be assessed by the employer to determine, does this person meet my needs that I require? Thanks.
Thank you very much. Unless people have burning contributions on that question, which I'm going to regard as the final question for the day, I just want to go through and ask from anybody. Let me start with Warren Mduduzi. Final remarks, 30 seconds each, final remarks before we close. Warren, anything from you?
Yeah, I just think, the department, we are here to provide answers and assistance and guidance as well. So if they have any questions, they're welcome to contact the department. But yeah, there is a lot of information out there on ergonomics and risk assessments and mitigating controls. So yeah, there's a lot of information out there which is freely available to people. And yeah, one thing is that ask your colleagues or even your competition. They might have a similar problem that they've dealt with and sorted out. So let them share that information with each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Warren. On your side, Duduzi, any final comments for you for our attendees, particularly considering this is the construction sector focused webinar? Duduzi?
Thank you, Mr. Ashraf. Thanks to everyone, and I think just thank you to the panel and the invite. Also to, I think, the participant, I think it was worth mentioning. I think what's important is we can be able to avoid this, because I think the purpose of this is how can we avoid it. And what we always preach is if we educate, and then involve, we can be able to avoid this. Thank you so much. That's all.
Before you go, Nduduzi, before you go, how can people get in touch with you and your organization if they got further questions beyond the webinar?
Okay, we are available online. They can see our contact details. But yeah, if ever there are further questions, you can share my details as you had. We have offices in Durban, Cape Town, and Johannesburg. And that's where our head office are. But we are available. We've got consultants that can also assist with any other issues. Regional managers are also available. But yeah, on our website, you'll find all those contact details.
Thank you very much for that, Nduduzi. Busi, any final comments from your side before we close?
My final comments, Ashraf, would be that from the presentations, what came out is that mostly in the construction industry, you know, they deal a lot with accidents. From the presentations, I didn't see any, you know, musculoskeletal disorders as, you know, the musculoskeletal disorders that develop over a long period of time. And of course, in South Africa, there are not that many studies. So I think that that's the area where we need to focus on, you know, to see, you know, how big is the problem and come up with the control measures, you know, recommendations. And the same thing with hand-arm vibration syndrome. There's a lot of vibrating tools that are used in the construction industry. And I think that, you know, we need to look into that. You know, as the NIOH, we have the lab that actually assesses workers who are suspected of having hand-arm vibration syndrome. And we have developed methods on medical surveillance for hand-arm vibration syndrome. And we think that that information can be helpful out there. Thanks, Ashraf.
Thank you very much. And then finally, Dr. Olafir Isak, any final comments from your side before we close?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Ashraf. I think the biggest thing is that if people have difficulty in setting up the medical surveillance program or trying to detail the requirements for those with their medical service provider, they are free to contact us. We will assist where we can. And from our experience in the whole medical surveillance industry as well, they're more than welcome to contact us for assistance in that as well.
Thank you very much. And now I need to say thanks to our team, Warren Mellon from the Department of Employment and Labour, Mduduzi Mtetwa from FEM, Dr. Busisiwe Nyantumbu Mkhize from the NIH's Occupational Medicine section. And then finally, you just heard from Dr. Isak Olafir, a qualified medical practitioner who made his contributions also based on his wealth of both national and continental experience. And then also to our team from the Occupational Medicine section, Dr. Nompumelelo Ndaba, who's the acting head of our Occupational Medicine section, and her colleagues, Dr. Shloni Maso and Dr. Edward Sipirwa. Thank you for your contributions in the background. And then finally, before we conclude, I need to ask Kobus van Wijngaard just to unmute his microphone and do his video feed. I think we just need to hear from the organizing team on the SAFSEC side, who's put together, I think, this amazing webinar. Over to you, Kobus.
All right, thank you very much, Ashraf. And again, just from SAFSEC side, we just want to thank you, all the attendees to the webinar. You have mentioned and thanked all the panelists and the presenters. Just thank you to all of them. We as SAFSEC also want to just thank NIO and everybody involved, especially yourself. Thanks for leading this webinar for us today. We really appreciate that. Yeah, we just want to put it out there. If there's any further questions, SAFSEC is also available for any questions following the webinar, and that anybody is more than welcome to inquire from us and myself, and we'll give prompt responses. Thank you very much again. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Kobus, for with your team there. And let me just get the name right. It's Dr. Luando Mazem. I got that right, Kobus?
It's Dr. Luando Maki.
Maki, yes. Sorry, like my microphone control today, my names are a bit bad. Thank you to the two of you for having initiated and represented SAFSEC in this collaborative effort. So thank you very much for all of your hard work and coordination around this. Kobus, thanks very much. Just a final comment. Niels Nortje has taken the opportunity of just reminding the members of SIOSH that they can claim their CPD points by, I think, directly going to the SIOSH website. And on that point, you have been attending the South African 2019 Ergonomics Regulations, the implications for the construction sector webinar as a collaborative effort between SAFSEC and the NIOH. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.